Over the years, America has been built on technological inventions. Steamboats, railroads, and automobiles changed the way people moved from place to place. As the United States rocketed into the 1960s, people were still in awe of the technological changes happening in the world. The US and the Soviet Union were still neck and neck with each other to see who could be the first nation to claim outer space. The two countries sent rockets and explorers into space. The two world powers also continued their Cold War with one another. Together, the rivals built up enough weapons to cause more damage than the atomic bombs in Japan. It seemed for a while that their disagreements might lead to yet another world war. During all the political and military drama between the two nations, however, one of the most important goals they still shared was getting the first human to the moon. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy announced a big goal for the United States. He declared that by the end of the decade, the U.S. would safely land an American on the moon. When Kennedy was assassinated or killed for political reasons in 1963, Americans wondered if the president's death would mean the death of the country's space program too. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over as leader of the nation. He quickly announced that the space program would continue as planned. Millions of dollars and hours of work were put into the Gemini program. When the last Gemini flight ended in 1966, the US was able to take all the information they had gained and build even better rockets and larger spacecrafts. Americans planned the Apollo missions next. For a while, it seemed the space program might never be a true success. In January 1967, 3 US astronauts died when their Apollo 1 space capsule caught fire during a pre-flight test. The deaths of Virgil Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee stunned the nation. NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, was in charge of the country's space program. NASA stopped all space missions for months in order to redesign space capsules and emergency procedures. Late in 1968, the US launched the Apollo 8 spacecraft. On board, the astronauts prepared to be the first to leave Earth's orbit. The spaceship was able to get close to the moon and orbit it 10 times. However, it did not land. With the success of Apollo 8, President Kennedy's promise to put a man on the moon seemed within reach now. On July 16, 1969, a giant rocket was launched from Cape Kennedy in Florida. The rocket was as tall as a 28-story building, and right on top was the Apollo 11 spacecraft. 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Edwin Buzz Aldrin Jr., and Michael Collins, were prepared to do what humans had never done before. They would land on the moon and make America the winner of the space race. Millions of Americans watched on television as one of the greatest moments in history took place. On July 20th, 1969, the Apollo 11 lunar module landed on the moon. Commander Neil Armstrong climbed down the ship's ladder and stepped onto the surface of the moon. "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," he said into his radio. The landing and return trip home to Earth went without any problems. Humans had conquered space travel. The United States was proud to claim they were the first to get a man to the moon. Between 1969 and 1972, the country sent 6 manned missions to the moon. 12 men walked on the surface of the moon. For a moment, the nation seemed to stop and celebrate its victory in space. However, turmoil back on Earth soon brought all of the celebrating to an end, as the country experienced one of the most troubling of all eras.